the latest edition of the Bluegrass Soccer Cast. I am your normally co-host, but I am the main host today, John Hunt, and today I am joined by Zach from Vamos Morados. Zach, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing, John?
Uh, cannot hear you right now.
Uh-oh.
Your mic muted or something?
All right, how about now? Still nothing.
Oh, I got you now. Now that was on me. I had somehow turned off the sound on my computer.
There we go.
Yeah. So
how are you doing, John?
I'm very good, doing okay, making it, surviving right now. For those who don't know necessarily you or what y'all do, even though we've had Bennett on before, can you give our listeners a little introduction to you?
Yeah. So I am the smart, attractive half of the Vamos Morados podcast. Each week, we talk mostly about Louisville City and Racing Louisville. We'll get into some general soccer news. I think because of racing, we've been covering a lot of like women's national team and World Cup stuff this year, and we like to cover news, some of the other teams around the state when it happens. But our main focus is Louisville City and racing.
All right, yeah. For those who that don't know, they're great to check them out. We did a big old mega pod like 2 weeks ago with them, all that type of stuff. But speaking of that, there's actually been both teams in Louisville have made news within the last week. We'll start with racing, with the hat you're wearing and all that stuff. And considering their news is a little more shorter to talk about.
Not a surprise.
No, not to me. It wasn't a surprise at all. I felt very much that it was going to happen. But for those that don't know, they parted ways, right? They didn't fire him.
So the way that it was reported, he was on a 2-year deal with a team option for year 3, and so the team declined to pick up the option on him. So that was how I saw it stated. So not necessarily fired, just not returned.
That's the respectfully fired, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that came as no shock to me. Coach Kim as a whole, he doesn't stay places a while. Like his whole coaching career, been at places maybe 2 years, I think it was, is at most. So to me, it's no shock. But what was your initial reaction to that, and your thoughts as it's happened going forward?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was not a surprise. There was actually a small period of time when we didn't hear it right as the season ended. I was a little worried that maybe the team did just good enough to keep him on another year, and I was a little concerned that would have maybe stunted the team's growth a bit. And so, I mean, I don't think he was terrible. I'm not like dancing on his grave and happy he's gone, but it felt to me kind of for his whole time here, like he never really was able to adjust to coaching in America and in the NWSL, because as the league is structured completely different than any other soccer league in the world outside the United States, really. And it's just, you have to deal with a lot of weird roster rules that you don't have in other places. The standard of play overall, I think, is higher than in a lot of the other leagues that he's coached in, certainly. And there's just a lot more parity here in the US and the NWSL that like in the European leagues, you tend to have maybe 2 or 3 teams that are like a level above the other ones. Uh, and so you've got a lot of, if you're one of those 2 or 3 teams, you have maybe a couple games a season that are real challenges, and then a bunch of teams you can kind of go beat up on. Whereas especially this season in the WSL, the difference between the best team and the worst team was tiny. So every single game is you're playing against someone almost as good as you. So the margins are just very thin here. So it felt to me like it was never never like a super great fit. They did well under him, and I think recruited and signed players well, but it never felt like the team got the most out of the roster they had.
Yeah, that was my feeling as well. Like digging into his background and stuff, I was very curious why they brought him in to begin with. And then seeing how he handled the roster, it was very much like you have this super talented roster. You're like the first team to send 5 or more people to the World Cup of different countries. So not just like, oh, we got a lot of American or Canadian stars. No, we got people from all over. And you don't really do much with them, specifically the attacking talent, because that's what everyone was. They were either a midfielder or a forward that went to the World Cup for racing.
Well, and I feel like to really rub it in, like right after the news posted, just these past couple days, Kanu for Nigeria had a goal and an assist in the game Nigeria played this week, and Timby for South Africa scored a brace in their game. So right away, 2 of the players are excelling on their national team. That I mean, Timby had a good season, especially coming back from injury this year. But I thought Kanu specifically has been. She was the most that racing has ever spent on a player in a deal, and I think had a fairly disappointing season for us with that, given that context, but appears to be playing very well for Nigeria, which is, I think kind of highlights some of the issues.
Yeah. Speaking of those, what are your thoughts on the fact that the NWSL playoffs got interrupted for international breaks?
I hate it. The scheduling is always a nightmare. It was actually better this year than it's been in years past, because especially in World Cup years, you would just have all of the star players gone for like 2 months of the season. I remember the last World Cup before this one, the MVP voting was just a joke because I think Rose, like with the team of the season, half the players had played less than 10 games that season because they had been gone playing the World Cup all game. So I think the league did improve things this season with playing the Challenge Cup during the international break. I think for the World Cup, I think that was really nice. But yeah, just like taking a week off in the middle of the playoffs to have a bunch of players go play international games is not great.
No, it's not. And the World Cup and all that stuff, and like the Asia Games with Wang Shin, I was like very worried that would keep Coach Kim in. He was like, listen, I didn't have my best players. They were all gone for half the season, or they were trying to do qualifiers and all this type of stuff. Just give me another year. I'll be okay. And I'm happy that they went. They're like, no, we're good. We're moving on. Do you have like a short list of candidates you want them to at least look at? Is there anyone you're wanting them to bring in?
I think it's going to be tough. So as much as I think like they probably were going to not be a playoff team again next season if he had stayed, there are 5 teams, I think, looking for a coach right now. So there's going to be 4.
I know
I think
KC
one
just filled theirs with Black.
Kansas City filled theirs. So I guess 4 teams now. But just there are a lot of coaching positions open right now. So I'm a little concerned that they may have trouble outbidding some of these other teams for maybe a first or second choice. I know a thing that has been floated around a ton, and a lot of people are really in favor of is their assistant coach this season, Bev Yanez, promoting her to the job. Um, I would be fine if that's what happens because I honestly think she's a former player. The players like her. I think they might, in the long run, have a better shot at getting a good coach, giving someone their first job than trying to get like a known big name. Um, but it's also she's only been an assistant coach for a little bit. It feels like it's just a little early for that move. I would have really liked um, if they had been able to maybe have her be interim coach for the last couple games of the season and get sort of an idea of how she looks in that head coaching spot. But I think that's an option at least. But I don't have a short list because I'm not sure who they're going to be in the running for against the other teams that they have openings right now.
Yeah, it's so coaching in general with soccer to me is just so hard, especially with these not as big teams, you could say, type thing. Because like there's also the whole like there's men, the guys who traditionally coach men that will come in and coach women's soccer occasionally. So I'm like, are they just gonna find like they're gonna go to like Stanford and grab their coach? Like, and that's the other thing. There's these college coaches out there that kind of jump, kind of don't. It's super weird to me. And to your point with Bev is like assistants, I'm all for, but I'm also like they need to be an assistant forever for me to be like, okay, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the upgrade. If they're just an assistant for a few years, I'm like, I don't know. I would kind of prefer someone who's maybe been a head coach type
Yeah.
thing. I get a little shaky.
Well, I think my main thing, especially, I mean, we talked about Coach Kim. I think my main stipulation is I want it to be someone with NWSL experience in some form. Not maybe not necessarily a head coach in the NWSL, maybe a former player, maybe someone who's just been on staff somewhere, but someone who has experience with this league specifically. Because I do think just grabbing someone from Europe, we're gonna run into a lot of the same issues we've had.
Yeah, I think the league thing I think is very important, specifically because they play a different calendar with all the international breaks in there, with how small the league is too. Like as as much as it's like more established, you could say, than like the England Super League, they have less teams. So it's like so different. And playing in it is very different. So I'm very curious to how it will go and how that search will go. Um, but that's about it for racing, unless I've missed something. Is there any other news that's come out of late?
They posted the rules for the expansion draft today.
Yes.
I think they will be able to protect 9 players. That was the big one I saw. So
Only 9.
only 9, which is gonna be rough. There's 2 players picking. I believe if one of the teams picks a player off of your team, you are allowed to protect another player after that.
Okay.
So theoretically, you can protect 10 players overall, but only 9 of those at first. I think anyone who has a trade exemption or trade protection in their contract has to be protected. Um, I'm trying to think. You cannot select players under 18, which is not a thing that will affect racing because they don't have any teenagers signed. It's still we complained about having a week off in the playoffs. It still irks me that teams have been signing teenagers and they still don't actually have any formal like academy contracts or any setup there to give teams a framework for bringing players up through their academy. So I'm not even sure how that works right now, but yeah. So no teenagers. You can protect 9. Yeah, I'm worried about the expansion draft. I really would like a coach before like the college draft and the expansion draft start. That's sort of my time frame. I don't want to get in another situation where we've already had all those drafts happen and we signed a coach right before the season starts.
Yeah, that would not be ideal. I personally think they should have that person by the end of the month.
Thankfully, we have a GM now, which we did not have last time we had a vacancy. So that helps things a little bit.
Yeah, that should probably help. Speaking on the expansion draft, what players are you like they have to protect these people? And what are the players? Because I just looked at it briefly. The Racing can lose no more than 2 players. That's as most as they can lose. What 2 players do you think would be the ones that would likely get picked up?
Okay, so I'm going to run through who gets protected and then sort of.
Yeah, who are your 9 or 10 that are like solid,
so,
like no question?
DeMelo, Howell, let me pull up a.
You think they protect Lund?
Lund, yeah. DeMelo, Howell, Lund, Lauren Millay, I think gets protected. She played every single minute this season. So that's 4 down. I don't know who has trade clauses in their contract, though. That complicates it.
That is my thing with any, like, all American soccer is super annoying with these contracts. MLS is annoying. The USL is super annoying because, like, half the teams don't even report their contracts. So they're just like, yeah, we signed this guy. You have no idea how long he's here for, but we have this guy. Just enjoy him while he's here.
So Pickett, I think, for sure gets protected. So that's 5. There's only 4 left. Oh, wow. Man, this is going to be a rough
9 is tight. You don't have a starting 11 that you can protect. You can't, like, protect starters. If you do it right, you're going to lose a starter.
Borges. And then, I mean, they just spent all that money signing Kanu, so it's hard to think you would just let her go for free in a draft. I think Wang Shuang, they probably want to keep for sure. Man, so they're going to have. I think the big question mark at Erceg is the kind of player that probably has a trade clause in her contract, so they might have to protect Erceg. So that would be their 9. But that leaves like Piki would be underprotected in that situation. Davis, Timby. I didn't mention Timby. That's so. What I'm hoping is they maybe sign some deals before the draft, contingent on like a draft exemption. They did that last draft. So, and what I would hope is if they could possibly make a trade and get an outside back in the trade, and then maybe give up a couple. They're sort of deep at sort of attackers on the wings, so I could see maybe trading away an attacker and maybe some allotment money for draft protection and maybe getting an outside back. That would be ideal. But see, we've got 2 teams, so you still would have another team making picks.
Yeah, it's hard when you bring in 2 teams and when you protect as little as that. That's where the league size really hurts during this expansion part, because there's only 12 teams right now. You're adding 2, but there's only 12 teams. So where are they going to come from?
We're getting close to my 16, which I think is like the magic number. It feels like a real soccer league once you get to about 16. I feel like that's a solid home and home schedule. That's sort of where I would like to see the league get to for the medium term.
16 is good. Like, I think the Bundesliga is only at 18 teams too. So it's like you have a top 3 European side that's only at like 2 more than that.
So I think Scotland is like 14 to 16, which I think is sort of on the small end of like a good
small end, but Scotland has not. Scotland has been won by the same 2 teams.
Yeah.
Besides like 1 year in like the 80s. It's like absurd. Like Rangers has won like 55 league championships, and like Celtic has the other like 49, 51 in there. It's like absurd over there. But the size of the league is interesting. But I'm also curious, do you feel some of racing's death might get picked off by the Super League coming through the USL?
At season 1, I don't think so. I think the players the Super League are going to be able to, just because the NWSL has the name recognition. I think
100%.
they're not going to be offering significantly more. I think for end of the bench players, they'll probably be able to get either the same or a slightly larger contract from the Super League. But probably most players are very competitive and would want the chance to play in the big league over a small amount more money to play in what is the unproven league yet. But I could see, if the Super League does really well, it does start to really pull away some of those maybe bench players and like occasional starters that could get a bigger deal in the Super League. I honestly am not sure how that will play out.
Yeah, it's just, to me, because I feel more fringe players are going to do it because it could be a chance to showcase while staying in America type thing. And what I'm also curious about is because Indy and Lexington are joining the Super League. So those are two teams right by Louisville. So if a person's like, I like the area, I don't really want to move. Okay, well, there's a team an hour north and there's a team an hour east that you could easily play for too.
And I think the Super League really puts pressure on the NWSL to get the academy figured out.
Oh yeah,
that is where I think the Super League will start to really poach players. Is if they have an academy system and players coming up through, especially you mentioned we have teams close that you don't want to lose out on, because you have a draft and a bunch of weird roster rules. You don't want to lose out on players coming up through the academy system, which is sort of what the USL Championship is doing to MLS a little bit right now. I mean, you've got players like Winder who decide, I would rather come up through the academy on a USL team in my hometown and then go straight to Europe and sign a big contract than have to deal with college and a draft and all the. If you play in an MLS team's academy, you have trouble signing with teams because they hold on to rights forever, and it's just a weird situation.
Discovery MLS discovery rights are the dumbest thing ever, because they also use them on like established players or something along those lines. I forget what it was. Like Rooney had, like, DC United had his established rights from like the very beginning, or whatever the rule, not established, discovery rights. And I'm just like, you can't discover the star of Manchester United.
So I could see, before they're signing depth players and causing trouble there, I see maybe the academy in the USL side starting to hurt the NWSL. And I also think, I've been of the opinion for a while that there aren't enough top level pro teams in the US for the amount of high level college players that are coming out of here. I think with just having the NWSL right now, a lot of really good college players just don't have jobs. There's just not enough soccer positions to go around. So I do think
it's not big enough.
There are so I don't think it'll necessarily eat too much into the talent pool, because I think you get a lot of players that honestly like go undrafted or don't get a look that probably could play it in the league and just miss out on a shot because there aren't enough spots. So that's a situation where having another league could help, because some of those players could have a standout year for a Super League team and sign a bigger contract with the NWSL. Yeah, I my wish, if everything good, is that the Super League would push the NWSL to fix their academy system and maybe not be so reliant on like the draft and a lot of the American sports staples that they have. And if the Super League could eventually be like a really, really good second, just under the NWSL second league. I think that gives a lot of players a more clear path to the big leagues. I think there is room in the U.S. for both of them.
Yeah, and that's like I think there is room in the U.S. because the NWSL right now is 15 teams. They have the two they're adding, and there's Boston coming. Yeah, so that's 15 teams, but if you do like the men's professional ones, you're at like 40, 50.
And you have how many like high level?
You're even more. No, you're even like in the 70s if you throw in NISA and like MLS Next and all that type of stuff. So you go from the men that have like 80 teams, and then you have women who have 12 teams. 15 possibly. I think it's really going to be really important to the landscape of it, because think about like just how many good American players are on like Blue City. Yeah, they might not play for the national team, but like they're good, high quality players.
And some of them are playing on the national team.
Yeah, some are playing on national teams. Some are. You have like Matt Turner, who played for the Kickers and then eventually worked his way up to now he's a starting keeper in the Premier League. So I think that pathway. It just needs to be established more. It's just so congested. Like I was at the Portland game for Racing. I was down on the field at the national anthem, and I'm looking at Crystal Dunn and Sinclair on the bench for Portland. And I'm just like, these are like world-class stars. You have the leading international goal scorer, and this is after Sophia Smith got hurt, and she's coming off the bench. Yes, she's older, but still.
I mean, Racing had players on 6 different national teams in the World Cup. They were for the opening round. The group played the team with the most goals scored from any of their, and they finished 9th. Like, even Racing is stacked with international talent, and is struggled to even be in the playoff picture near the end of the season.
Yeah, so I think it makes it more interesting. I think it will make the NWSL better as a whole, because even if they use the Super League as like a developmental league for some of the younger players, it still gives them that platform to where they can be in America still, even be close to, say, Racing, if Racing utilizes Indy and Lexington, that they can develop, that they can use their talent, or it can be a platform type thing. Like, looking over Lou City, even, there's like 2 or 3 guys on that team or in the top of the academy that are from Lexington prior to the team's academy being like established. So like, just imagine how many kids are like in this area.
Well, I think of somebody like Julia Lester on Racing's team, who was not able to break into the NWSL straight out of college, went and played in Cyprus, I think, and then was signed by because Coach Kim, he knew her because she played for him in Cyprus, and signed here, and has had like very good seasons with Racing. And that's a player, hopefully, that rather than having to go play in Cyprus, is able to join a Super League team and stay in the United States and develop here moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be good as a whole for America and the soccer landscape, because it's so bottlenecked right now. And it's like such a quick bottleneck. It's not slow. It's just like college and then so that wrapping up Racing, that's what's going to happen. And now we go to the very exciting thing, the inevitable Eastern Conference Finals appearance, people, Lou City. So kind of what are your thoughts after the drumming of Detroit.
I believe in magic. The spell is real. The team has to make it to the Eastern Conference Final. I was so sure heading into the playoffs that this was going to be the year that finally broke the streak and the weight was off my back. Every playoffs worrying about this being the year that breaks the streak. I was like, I had come to terms with it, and then they get it to overtime in Memphis. They advance on penalty kicks. They have all of the other results in the East go the way they needed them to get a home game in the second round, and they looked really good in that Detroit game too. I mean, I know Detroit's the 8th seed.
I don't know where they came from out of that. Yes, Detroit's the 8th seed. They technically,
but they had a good defense. They're not a team that has given up a lot of goals this season.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about, and that's why, like I stated, is like you're talking about the Detroit team. This was last week with Jimmy that took down the Eastern Conference champs by doing a thing of like you're not getting a goal at all, and we're just gonna pray we get one.
I was
type thing, and I was like,
I was joking at the game that Louisville City had a corner kick early in the game, and I pointed out every single Detroit player was behind the penalty spot. They did not have a single player with any chance of running a counter off of that corner. They just were packing the box and were not even concerned about getting forward and scoring off the counter. And that to be able to break a team down who came in wanting to play like that and has succeeded at playing like that, I think is a very good sign moving forward. They appear to have figured some stuff out.
They have figured some stuff out. I don't know if that was just they figured Detroit out and they figured out Detroit's defense and it was like they didn't have necessarily the pressure on Blue City's back line as they've had these past few going into the playoffs a bit, but it was otherworldly. It was really great to watch, really fun to watch. I am worried now about Charleston because they have been rolling.
Yeah. I'm weirdly I'm not worried about the game because I feel like given the season they had to make it back to the Eastern Conference Finals, I'm in a good mood regardless of what happens in this Charleston game. I'm happy with the way they ended the season. So I feel like they're playing with house money a little bit there. They don't have the expectations in this final that they generally have had in the past. But I do think Charleston's been playing well. But, I mean, they have been good, but not next level good all season. They've been pretty good. They got the 3 seed, but if you look at their home record, they're not invincible there. I think they're like 9-3-5 or something like that. So, I mean, they win more than they lose, but teams have gotten points there this season. They had 2 draws with Louisville City this season, so that the teams have been pretty evenly matched thus far. So I feel like I don't think Louisville City's the favorite necessarily, but I do think this is fairly close to a toss-up for me.
Yeah, the how they faced off in the regular season is really where I'm not sure going into this because I'm like, do they have momentum from rolling through Detroit, or was that more they just cracked Detroit right and they were able to play their type of like Blue City ball of the we can score at will, we can do what we want type thing. So that's where I'm real curious about was it just they broke Detroit, who is by points and stuff the worst playoff team, or was it no? We're back to Blue City of old. Or the playoff magic is here, type thing.
I think we'll find out really early. I think probably 15 minutes into this game, we'll know which one of those it was. I think if they come out and get a bunch of good chances, even if they don't hit any of them, if they're getting the ball forward and getting in the final third and getting shots off, I feel good. Whereas if we're back to like having trouble getting shots, I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's where I'm concerned about too. I'm concerned about because I think Charleston can put pressure on Lou City's backline that they didn't see in
Detroit
the
put none.
But that's what I'm saying. It's like I've seen all these people on Twitter kind of like, oh, it was so dominant and stuff, and then I like watched the game and I was like, it was dominant offensively, but the shutout kind of overshines the fact that the defense really just stood around.
Yeah. Well,
because
I mean, Detroit is probably the best team to get a lead on in the entire conference because their entire game plan was to make that game a 0-0 draw and take it to penalty kicks. And once you're up 2 goals, they have nothing to fall back on. Like they have struggled all season to score. They're not going to be able to change gears. Something that makes me feel a little better going into the Charleston game, though, is the team has made like a bit of a tactical shift that I think has helped in these past 2, the Memphis and the Detroit games, because they had been playing Mogul as the defensive midfielder for most of this season, and usually it's been him and Gibson, and they have swapped one for the other. But those are the 2 who have played in that 6th spot. But the Memphis game and the Detroit game, they have shifted Mogul up into playing more of a box-to-box central midfielder and putting Gibson on the field at the same time as him to play as the defensive midfielder behind him. And Mogul has been like really good in the press. That frees him up to get forward and help with the press. I think Gibson he's very experienced, so he's a steadier hand back there. I think he does a really good job of allowing the center backs for Louisville City to get up without fear of giving a counter, because he's very good at taking up space and stopping counters before they start. Because I think a little bit of what's happened this season is that they had those games early on where they just got torched on the counter, gave up 8 goals in 2 games. And it seems like ever since then, they have been less willing to get the center backs high like they historically have and get all the players forward in the attack. And I think they made a decision to be more defensive minded and be a little more conservative back there. And the defense did get better. They did not give up nearly as many goals the rest of the season after that, but they've had a lot of trouble attacking because they just have not gotten the numbers forward that they historically have. And I think having Gibson back there allows them to be a little more adventurous again. So I'm curious to see, because that'll be a little bit different of a look than they gave Charleston the last 2 times they played them. That is sort of that midfield 3 is where I'm looking. I think that's where this game will be won or lost.
Yeah, it's the playoff. To me, that's the playoff mentality of we're playing to not lose type thing. It's no longer like, all right, let's try to win. Let's try to get points in every game. It's like, no, we can't lose. Like, and that just changes how people play. And that's very much what I think it is of using Gibson and Mongley is like, this is our best way of shoring up our defense because it keeps both of them in there, but also giving us a chance to attack better and go forward more in the attack. Do you think that like the experience of Lou City is what's has helped them through these 2 games, especially like the playoff experience of like O&B and all of them?
I think for sure the experience is what won them that PK, the free kicks at the end of that Memphis game, because they were able to put 5 players in there who have been to multiple finals, and every single Louisville City shot was right on target. No one looked like the moment got to them. Everyone just put away their penalty. Whereas like Memphis, you had I don't remember who it was, but their fifth PK taker like got a little nervous, hit the crossbar, and that was the end of it. So I think for sure the experience is what got them out of that Memphis game. And then I think the Detroit game, they probably did not have to rely on it as much. But I do think that's an asset they have against Charleston.
Yeah, most definitely. It's just I'm very curious how it goes because I've been seeing like the stats and stuff pop up. They're not that great on the road in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're like 4-4 or whatever it is, and like 3 of those losses have been on the road, type thing. So, what is your like ideal match for Lou to win this one?
I think they need to, similar to that, if we want the game to look anything like the Detroit game did, I think they probably need the lead early. I think that changes up the way Charleston's going to play defense. I think that opens the game up for them. I think if we get to halftime and it's still 0-0, that's going to play into Charleston's favor a lot. So I think Louisville City wants to try to open the game up. I think scoring early will do that. But obviously having the lead always helps. So
yeah. So when is there a phase of the game or the phase the game can go besides like 0-0 at half that you could get nervous, that you're going to start worrying?
So my biggest fear, the thing where I get a knot in the pit of my stomach that Louisville City has done for years, if it's one of those games where they seem like we go the whole first half and it seems like they're the team that's getting the better chances and they're getting shots and just none of them are going in, and you start feeling like, are we gonna in the second half regret that we were not able to put away into these 2 or 3 really good chances we have, and then they either mentally or physically sort of wear themselves out a little bit, and the other team comes back and just punches them in the face in the second half. That's my fear. I think if it's like that Memphis game where it's just like grind it to a halt, no one's getting forward and getting chances, just like a defensive struggle, I'm not as worried as, if it seems like it's going a little City way and they're just not able to put a goal in. That actually worries me a little more.
Yeah, those are the type of games that's really interesting. Especially when that one team dominates and their team just holds strong and they get the one crack they need and they capitalize on it. That's where I'm worried about as well. Is Charleston going to hold strong and let Lou have their attack but not get good chances or that type of thing, like those near chances type thing, and they're just going to be like, all right, we just got to wait for that little defensive slip, and then we're going to get the one goal we need.
Run down the field and slot it in. It seems like it's like the longer Louisville City has the ball but doesn't score, the further and the further up the pitch those center backs get, and it's just sets things up when you don't score to get just ripped up on the counterattack, which has been their weakness historically.
It says. Now I want to kind of draw back here because there's been some discourse on Twitter about like the significance of 9 straight Eastern Conference Finals and how big of a deal it is. Is it really a big deal? Type thing. Can you compare it to like the 5 major sports leagues? Like, what's your thoughts on it?
I think it's huge. It's an insane streak if you just think statistically, because even I think kind of a crazier thing is, other than this year, they've not really required any upsets in the playoffs to make 9 straight. They've just, for the first 8 of those years, I think they were a 1 seed or a 2 seed almost every year in the East. So when you pair that with the regular season success they've had as well, it's just even if you're the 1 seed every season for 9 years, it's crazy to make the conference finals every single time. I mean, it's a single elimination soccer playoff game. There's a lot of random chance thrown into single elimination soccer games. So I think,
I mean, we just today saw a third division side in Germany take down Bayern Munich.
anybody can win in one game.
Yeah.
So I do think it's impressive when you just how improbable it is, even if you're the favorite in every single one of those games to have kept the streak alive this long. And then add to that they've been the favorite in almost all of them. I think really, yeah, it is hard to argue that any other professional soccer team in the United States has had a better last 9 years than Louisville City has.
I feel like that's the way to agree. There's not any team that I can come up with of any sense that have dominated. Even you could even argue in the open systems and that sort of thing with the way the USL is structured. There's yes, Bayern and Juve have had their streaks of winning the league and stuff like that, but they also are big clubs in their country. They're in the upper echelon of they just have more money than everybody else, so obviously they're gonna win. You don't have that in the USL.
They have no structural advantages over any other teams.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing of people are well, it's not that dominant. It was the other teams that dominate have this structural advantage, or they're people are calling for Ten Hag of Manchester United to be fired, and they're 10th in the league or something like that in the Premier League, sort of thing. So I'm it's very interesting what Lou City's doing and how well they're doing it.
Yeah, it still reminds me. When you mentioned other sports, it reminds me a little bit. If I had to pick a comparable run, it reminds me of those early 2000s through 2010s San Antonio Spurs teams where they didn't win the championship every year during there, but just every single season they were good and they were in the mix. And they were not from the biggest city. They were not the Lakers. They didn't have a big payroll advantage over other teams. They just every year they were solid and had a good regular season and did well in the playoffs for an extended period of time. That's if I had to think of a comp, that's what I would compare it to.
Yeah,
but
I definitely think that's agreeable.
Even then, it another crazy part of it though is they've gone through 3 coaches in that span too, and have not lost a beat. Whereas the Spurs have the same coach for that entire run, so you've got some continuity there. And they've had a lot of continuity on the roster, but to also have 3 different coaches over that span, I think it's another layer of just how crazy of a streak that is.
Yeah, it's certainly insane. With the streak being extended and all that type of stuff, do you feel that this season is now a win? This is a positive season coming out of this, or do you want playoff magic to not cloud the regular season?
I think the playoffs are a win. And I think it's still the regular season is what it is. So I don't think any amount of playoff success is not going to change that. I think it was a disappointing regular season by Louisville City's standards. To have a negative goal differential, not be hosting in the first round, those are not things you expect Louisville City to do. So I don't think it was a failure of a season, but it was not the success that the team wanted. Especially if you read interviews with Coach Cruz coming into the season, it was very clear that the team's goal this season was to win the league in the regular season, and so team fell way short of that. So but it's not a colossal failure. They still did what they needed to get into the playoffs. They got to host a playoff game. But it did not rise to, I think, the team's own standards.
Yeah, so but from what I'm understanding and stuff, and kind of I'm at this point too of like, even if the playoff magic stays alive and they can add a third star, you very much want to be like, okay, let's take a step back, let's look at them as a whole, type of thing. Where do you think?
I think it would change where they rank among the other stars. I think you win the star, that's always a great year, regardless. But I think if you're saying what's the better year, the 2018 championship or this one, I think the regular season factors into that. I think unless they come out and just absolutely destroy teams in these next two games, they're probably not in the running for best Louisville City year ever. But a kind of a weird flip side to that is having a little bit of a disappointing season does make the playoff success feel better than when you come in as the 1 seed and you just have expectations on you. I think it would definitely feel the best of the championships other than the first one, just because it would come as a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. So do you think with that, if they do, or they like at least make the final type thing, does that show does that put faith in Coach Cruz for you in the sense of like, all right, let's trust him, let's type of thing, like cool that seat way down, he's okay unless they like truly stumble out of the gates and can't recover next year?
Yeah, I think they've already. I think Coach Cruz has a long leash. I think he had, especially after the season the team had last year, where they were just incredible. They were blowing teams out all year that year. The year would have need to have been much worse than it was this year, I think, for Cruz to be on the hot seat. And I think the playoffs have given him even more rope, really. I think things would need to go very bad for a long amount of time, I think, for Cruz's job to be in question during the season next year. Now, I think if they come out and have an even worse regular season next year than they had this year, I think that definitely raises some questions. But I think this playoff run has definitely quieted any of that you would have for now.
Are there players that you feel is time to either move on from with that's the age question gets tossed around, even with this playoff run and stuff? Are there players you feel that maybe it's time to let them ride off into the sunset sort of thing, or part ways with to continue the success moving forward in hopes of continuing?
There is one player that has been here for the entire 9 conference final streak, which is Nile. And he's had some injury troubles last 2 seasons. He's not played as much as he historically had, but he's looked good. I mean, he's looked good when he's been there this season in his limited minutes compared to years past. If I had to pick a player that I would guess is like, this is the man, and if that's what this is, then I really hope they're able to continue the playoff run. But I could see it possibly being a ride off into the sunset year for Nile. The other player I had sort of been thinking that about was Oscar, because he's also played, coming into this season, he played a lot less last year than he had in years past, but he's actually had a very good second half of the year this year with Amadou and Manny having some injury trouble. He's played a lot and played really well. And so I would not be surprised to see Oscar come back for another year, but I think he's another player who just, his role on the team is not what it was in years past. He's sort of gone from the every game starter to like a substitute or playing when other players are injured. And then I think Paolo's probably also the other question mark. I think in a similar situation to Oscar, he was like captain, play every game, and he's been coming on as a sub a lot this season. But I think he's already said some things about planning on coming back for next year. I think he had said he did not think this was his final year. So I think he's by what I understand from what he said, I think this is not his last rodeo. So
All right. Kind of ending things here. What is your score prediction for the battery match, if you had to pick?
I 2-1 Louisville City, but it's in extra time. I say it's 1-1 at the end of regular time, and then Louisville scores to keep it from going penalties.
Yeah, I don't. It's something with the single elimination that just brings out the extra time, and especially when you have two really good teams. I do not see this ending in regulation. I agree with you that I think it's going to be a 2-1 thing. I think Lou City just has that experience there is going to prevail in that time frame. We'll see who prevails. But I'm with you on that 2-1. So to wrap up and all that type of stuff, Zach, where can people find you moving forward and stuff?
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter at Zach W. Allen. I am planning. We'll see how this goes. I'm gonna try to do some more stuff for our podcast is hosted on State of Louisville Podcast Network. I'm gonna try to maybe do some more stuff for their website, maybe illustrate some things or do some writing. So pay attention there. And then I finally got a Blue Sky invite, so I'm also Zach W. Allen on there. And VamosMorales.com. That's where Benton does his writing and we post our podcasts.
All right. Well, it's been real fun, Zach, to have you on. Thank you for filling in for Jimmy, and I hope I wasn't too bad. My first time actually hosting a podcast type thing. For all the Bluegrass Soccer Cast fans out there, make sure to like and follow us on all social platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, if that thing's still around. We're still waiting on our Blue Sky invite or whatever other.
I got codes. They finally gave me some codes. So I'll hook you up.
All right. Whatever other app is people are trying to come out and replace Twitter, especially with it probably leaving Europe here soon. That is going to be at BG Soccercast. Make sure to, if you would like to buy us coffee, we have our links up, the QR codes up there in the left corner. I'm not really sure. Right down below us. We try to keep everything free here. We don't want to put anything behind a single paywall. So any little donation or type thing wants to help keep us freelancers going, because I still work a 40-hour-a-week job. So this is all done in my free time. It'll be really appreciated. But I'm John. This was Zach from Vamos Morados, and we will see you on the next one.